is called development and displacement. You see, whenever we are telling the development and displacement, it is a very, is it visible? Hello? Is PPT?
No, sir.
Is PPT visible?
No, sir.
Not okay. Is it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you see, we'll discuss about, when we're discussing about development and displacement, my major focus will be on tribal displacement and all. So you see, if you look into, because this is a very, very warning area throughout the world, specifically whether it is tribal or non-tribal, if you look at the displacement and the development is a very warning topic throughout the globe. And see, the uprooting of millions of people to new unknown places is a matter that is now becoming increasingly continuous. Such displacement results in a profound socio-economic and cultural disruption to the people affected, as well as the disturbance of the social fabric of local communities. And the displacement, rehabilitation and resettlement are not by choice, but mostly by compulsion. What is happening? This becomes a compulsion. Means it is not that I have given a choice to you that whether you will be displaced or not. Rather, I am forcing you, you are compelled to leave the place. So look into this in general, if whenever we are discussing about the development and displacement. In most countries of the world, states have their quest for development. All states are looking for the development. Right? So different in the world, different states, different countries, all are quest for the development. So they all look for that how, because there is a competition among the countries, there is a competition among the states within the countries to how to grow themselves, how to develop themselves, and they are all quest for the development. And while they are all quest for the development, they are not thinking about that what kind of things are going to happen because of this quest for the development. And this quest for the development is causing displacement and rehabilitation of their population. The scale of displacement due to the development has been truly enormous. In order of 10 million people per year since 1980s are being displaced. During first decade of 21st century, around 15 million people are also already displaced. So if you look into this, the gravity of displacement is becoming so serious. And day by day, the number is keep on increasing because we are all quest for the development. We are inviting lots of development projects. We are in a mode to extract more and more resources to meet the ever increasing demand of the present communities, for which we are all thinking of how the things can be done. So if you look at the development via extractive industrialization, which has been the mantra of development in India since post-independence period, have displaced mostly, roughly 60 million people from their land. Look into and how since independence it has becomes the main mantra of development, the spirit of development. It becomes the idea of development. It becomes the ideology of development, the displacement. If you look at even the Odisha context, Odisha alone has accounts for 3 million peoples because Odisha mostly quite famous for its natural resources, and it is the hub of natural resources for which, and in as the since independence, it has already displaced around 3 billion people in the name of development. Among the total displaced people in India, 40% are Adivasis, that is tribal, and 25% are Dalits, that is, means the majority peoples are the marginal communities and the voiceless. Because the main concern is that all these people who are being displaced, who are being forced to leave their place, are mostly the voiceless peoples. In one side, we are all telling about voice for the voiceless, but in reality, who is putting the voice for the voiceless? That becomes a very fundamental question of our discussion. So neoliberal state developmentalism is based on the market logic of economic growth. This has resulted in the land acquisition because you see the neoliberal development policy has always given market as a major importance. So which has emphasized on the land acquisition, displacement, and the resource-rich territories inhabited by the tribals, because most of the tribal communities in India are mostly living in the resource belt, and that is why they are always being victimized because of this development projects. The land acquisition and displacement process are very complex process, which involves the use of multiple informal tactics and strategies with the involvement of multiple actors where state plays the dominant roles. So you see, it is not that only one stakeholder is being involved in the process of this displacement and all. The rehabilitation, land acquisition, the displacement is a very complex process which includes lots of multi-stakeholders, and lots of tactics and lots of strategies are being uh, used. And specifically, if you look into the state plays always a major role in acquiring all these lands and impoverishing the poor. What is important is how development by a heavy industrialization has already affected the population. Because see, the question is, there are lots of people are being victimized, lots of people are being forced to live in the slum areas, because you see, in the name of development, we have alienated the peoples from the mainstream process of development. We have forced them to go and stay in a slum area, because you see, look into the cities now, the way the city is rising up. But the people who are really contributing for the development of the cities are mostly deprived, are alienated from the, because if you look at the Marxian view of alienation, these are the people who really contributed in the process of development are being alienated in the mainstream of development, and they are always victimized. The rich are always taking the advantage of all these benefits. So the question will come that the development for whom, that we are going to discuss in the later part of this presentation. Land acquisition and displacement have resulted a discontent among the peoples, among the local peoples, which they have resisted, making the alliance with various civil and political society. In the process, many political society have also been emerged. What I'm telling, the land acquisition and displacement have resulted discontent among the local peoples. The local peoples have mobilized themselves. They have started the collective actions. They have made some alliance with some civil societies, NGOs, and they have made alliance with different political organizations. And in course of time, different new political societies are being emerged. And if you look at the entire process of these development and displacement and resistance moments, you will find that since before the onset of this globalization, mostly the resistance movements got succeeded where the civil society supports the movements. The people win, the government failed, where there is a huge support from the civil society. But in the post-globalization period, the scenario completely changed. The Though the role of civil society increased, though the globalization has helped in getting lots of fund internationally for the NGOs and civil societies, but mostly the scenario got changed, and wherever the opposition extended the support to the movements, the political organization supported the movements, that movement got succeeded. And wherever the opposition parties joined hands with the governments, so then the government succeeded and the movements got failed, even in spite of lots of support from the civil society and all. The magnitude of displacement, if you look into the process of development projects, in India, more than 25 million people have been displaced due to the development projects, and about 12% are due to mining industries only. So, but most of them are specifically displacement. I'll come to that. This due to the dam project now. Only 24.7% persons got rehabilitation. This is the major problem in the development and displacement. Because you see, the people have lost the faith in the government, the people have lost the faith in the implementing agency. Because wherever they're seeing, out of 100 peoples, only 24.7% people are rehabilitated. So again, the question is whether they are rehabilitated or resettled. Because that is also question. Because most of the time, what is happening, we are only thinking about resettlement, not the rehabilitation. That is settling and rehabilitating. There is huge differences. Most of the time, we are only thinking about resettlement, not the rehabilitations. So the size of the local mines has grown from an average 150 acres in the 1960s to 800 acres in the 1980s. So that meant the open cast mining projects are keep on rising. Lots of people are being victimized because the mining process is going very fast. and which affected around 70% are tribals in industrial and mining projects. Most of them are tribal peoples. 64 lakh hectares of forest land is being diverted from mining in our country. Around 34.72% of forest lands got converted to non-forest use due to mining in Odisha. By 2007, the Coal India Limited has acquired 1,54,386 hectares of land, out of which 73,371 hectares is tenancy land and rest in government land and common property resources. These are all data and all. If you look into this kind of main cause of development and all, the major development is due to the specifically if you look into the development of communication networks, and you will find that is also severely affected. The first is creation of dams. 26.6% people are got displaced due to dam, then development of communication network, then mining projects, then water supply. All these things are rising the displacement as a major issue in our country. The question now arises, development for whom, for what and what cost? किसके लिए डेवलपमेंट चाहिए, क्यों चाहिए, किसके कॉस्ट में चाहिए? So what development for whom, for what and what cost? This is a very pertinent question which always comes to the minds of the researcher, that why this is happening, why lots of resistance is continuing. Every day you open the newspaper, you'll find that the movements are keep on increasing. If you look at the Jharkhand, Odisha and Chhattisgarh, most of the industrial belt of and some part of Telangana, Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, where there are lots of natural resources are there, you'll find the movements are keep on increasing. Every day the peoples are joined in the resistance, which we always claim the everyday resistance. Whether it is profit for the capitalist, the development, or the protection of the rights of the marginal communities, or the prosperity of large section. So these are the question. These are the first is the question, and these are the answer. Whether the development is for the profit of the capitalist, or the development is working for the protection of rights of marginal communities, or the development is working for the prosperity of large section. So for whom exactly the development is happening? See, Jawaharlal Nehru in 1948, when he was laying the foundation stone of Hirakud Dam, he told that he came to the Hirakud Dam and he was laying the foundation stone of the Hirakud Dam, and he told that in his public speech that if you are to suffer, you should suffer in the interest of the country. So, interest of the country. The question here is, why should actually suffer? Why not the whole? And you see, the development displacement is not only, you see, the people who are being displaced by Rakuten are again also displaced by another factors. So we don't have proper strategy for the development and displacement. See, we always tell that it's the national interest of the country, but the question is why IX only for the interest of the country? Why not everybody? And you see, then Jawaharlal Nehru claimed the development at the temple of industry at the temple of development. So he emphasized that we should go for industrialization as a temple of development. But you see, if you look into this in the traditional Indian society, which was completely based on caste system, the temple used to debar the Dalits to enter into the temples. The temple, the moment we tell temple itself has created division between the caste, higher caste and lower caste. And the same question arose when Jawaharlal Nehru told that the industries are the temple of development. So the temple of development, the industry as a temple also worked for the higher class and removed the marginal class. No doubt, we need the industrialization, which Marx is also welcome, that industrialization is also needed. But the question is, the way we are implementing, the way we are going for propagating the projects, the way we have lost the confidence of the peoples, that is the major problem, and for which the marginal communities are always victimized. So you can do that when a development project comes, all public are on the development, not on the cost. Because you see, whenever any development project comes to an area, what exactly happens? It's not that people oppose, rather people feel happy that something is coming for the betterment of their own area. So they always keep an eyes for the development of their own community. They never bother about the cost from the very beginning. But more significantly, since this is just a cost, statecraft and the government procedure reduce the cost to compensation. So you see, the people's wants the development, they never bother about the cost. But the government, who is standing in the opposite direction, is always wants how to reduce the cost because the government is always looking about profit. The government is always looking about revenue, not the people's. So that's why the statecrafts and the governmental procedure reduce the cost of compensation. So that's why the major problem starts. They reduce the cost of compensation, the rehabilitation and resettlement. How the minimum cost can be given for the entire compensation, resettlement, and rehabilitation? See, thus turning this entire thing into a game with the government and the plan by trying to minimize the cost. See, what exactly happens? So, if you look at this, the development process, I'll look into that. Very emotional things I'm going to tell you now. See, as an outsider, suppose look into, I'm staying in a city right now and I'm staying in say, an either Alcala. See, suppose we have a huge acres of land at village and my parents are staying in village. Suppose tomorrow an industry will come to my village and will tell that we want exactly an industrial grow now. As an outsider, what will happen? I may support the development because what I will tell, see, it is good that if an industry comes, the value of my land will increase, I will get lots of profits if the industry will come up. But see, as an outsider, I always support the development. I never bother about the pain of displacement. I've never bothered about the what are the things going to happen. But if you look into as an insider, what we think as an insider, we think about tomorrow. Then what next? As an insider, we think about tomorrow. We always think about the tomorrow. No. So we always think about if the industry will take our land, how we'll survive tomorrow, where we'll go tomorrow, whether we'll be able to see the sunrise and sunset tomorrow or not. That becomes a major question mark for the people who are living in an area where the development projects are being implemented. Imagine, so look into this kind of in one day that a multinational company arrives in your area and your national and state governments are with the national and state governments approval and seizes your lands, destroy your environment, local farms and the agricultural system, your religious places, pollutes your rivers, creates hazardous waste dumps throughout your town, blocks your effort to seek justice through the courts, and threaten to get people and activists arrested for trying to resist this destruction of your way of life. What will be your reaction? See, look into see, with the outsiders who supports this development without understanding the pain of the insiders, think about when your parents, suppose you say most of your parents might be working in a transferable job. Suppose your parents was working in a sector and one day in the evening, the parents come back from the office with a very sad mood and told that he got the transfer letter by within 5 days. You people have to leave, suppose one town and have to move to another town. Think about this is that suppose you are staying at a particular town which is not belongs to you because your parents are working in a transferable job and you are here for a few days and again you are moving to another place for a few days. But within that few days, the property is not yours, the home is not yours, the land is not yours, the culture is not yours, but still you develop a sense of emotion. When your brother got a transfer letter, you people are scolding, new people are trying to how to by paying certain kind of by by any source, by any mechanism, by hook or crook, you can cancel the transfer order and whether legal way or illegal way you can adopt for cancelling the transfer order. But you see, you are not understanding. Means you see, when the question of transfer comes, when the question of transfer comes, you are so much reactive, but you are not understanding how much pain the people are facing when they are permanently throughout life they are being transferred without understanding. Means when nobody is understanding that pain and they are going to leave their place forever, so think about them, what kind of pain might be for them. Because I have seen very closely the people's. used to cry by just holding a tree. The tree was planted by their forefathers at their home. Their plan, even they requested, you take all these things, you destroy everything, but don't please destroy my tree, which was being planted by my forefathers. They lost their cremation grounds where their forefathers are cremated. They lost their lands, they lost their house, they lost their cremation ground, they lost their village deity. So what more you need? Got it. What more you need? So you have lost everything. But the question is, so we never bother about them. We are only bothering about ourselves, but we are not bothering about the pain of others. You see, the perspective on displacement, there are two things. The state's perspective, displacement is justified in the national interest. What exactly the state always claims? The state always claim that displacement is justified in the national interest. What they told? The state always claim that in the name of nation's interest, in the interest of the majority, you have to leave the place. You have to sacrifice what Jawaharlal Nehru told in the interest of the nation, in the interest of the country, you have to suffer. That is the state's perspective on development. The long-term goods of the project merits the sacrifice of few in favor of the larger goods. But you see, have we ever understood the pain of the displaced people, the people who are going to be displaced? We have never understand their pain. The displacement is the systematic alienation of the individuals and the community's customary and illegal rights to their livelihoods. We are not understanding about that. It is not an event that occurs at a single point of time. Even there are lots of the cases where people are keep on displaced once after a few years. They displaced for one project. Again, the government has not made a proper strategy. After a few years, again they were forced to displace. So that is again much painful. These are the all state-wise data of displacement and all. Then protest, if you look into this, how the protest is intensifying in the country, the acquisition of land for industry is an issue which many think is a critical to India's development today. Because if you look into today, most of the projects are being held up because the agitation is continuing throughout the country. So everywhere, the people are being involved. See, whenever we launch anything to any development project, the people are joining hands for the moment. Large scale acquisition have now given rise to fierce farmers protest against the development project. You have seen the even the still the farmers protest is continuing in our country after the implementation of the farm law. So like that, whenever any development project has also come up, the movement is continuing. Most of the development projects are being held up. There is no major development projects today. There is not trouble over the land issue because most of the development projects are being held up because we are working without any proper issue, without any proper strategy. Because you look into, see, the major problem is the politicians, the administrators are not in a position to take the people into confidence, and the people have lost their faith on the local administration, the state administration, and the local and state political and the central political leaders. Neither they have faith in administration nor they have faith in governments. So what? Why they've lost the faith? Because the moment they're seeing the large-scale industries which is being built up, and the government has given lots of promise, but all these promises are being violated, and still lots of people are being suffering. See, if you look into only 24.7% people are being rehabilitated throughout the country, whoever are displaced. So that gives a panic situation in the minds of the peoples who are going to be displaced. So that's why they are joining in the resistance and they are making the resistance more and more vibrant. The loss of life in classes at Kalinganagar, you have seen the Nandigram, the Singur, epitomize the intensity of their resistance. Farmers are not only the resisting land acquisition in the prior are the NGOs and lately even political parties have lent their support to protest against projects that involve displacement. Look into the different political parties. They're only looking about their own profit and own benefits. Suppose today, if somebody is ruling party who invited the project, if they are being removed from the power the next day they invite the uh, next day they oppose the. I have seen very interestingly when this Nandigram and Singur, all this movement was very intensifying. Because why I mentioned this Kalinganagar, Singur, and Nandigram, you see, these are the three projects which are more or less started during the same period. When the communist governments in the West Bengal was inviting the Singur and Tata, inviting the Tata in the Singur and Nandigram and intensifying the development projects, and they are justifying in favor of the development projects. And the same Tata was, that was a Tata Motors, but he were a Tata for some mining projects in the Kalinganagar area. The same Communist Party who were arguing, the leaders who were arguing in favor of this industrialization in Singur and Nandigram, they came to Odisha just, the distance is within 150 or 200 kilometers. They came to Kalinganagar and they protest that the Tata should back and no industry should be built. So means the political parties, the political leaders should show one face. Their face should not be changed. Means in one state you should support the industrialization, in another state you should oppose. It should not be like that. We should be very rational, we should be very logical. My intention is that whenever any project is coming, let us first discuss at the grassroots level. People, take the people into confidence. Let us sit with them, because people are not against any development projects, because everybody wants a job, everybody wants the food to eat, everybody wants to stay happily. So that's what I'm telling you, have no right to take out somebody's happiness and somebody's life. So that's why you should work in collaboration with them. You should take the people into confidence. So the acquisition of land with the displacement implication has emerged as a formidable challenges to the investors. Now, she looked at the POSCO, who was invited in 2006 by the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, is not yet happened. So most of the time they're forced to leave the place. The investors are finding it is almost impossible to get a land for project purposes, and some are even planning to move elsewhere. So the different states are fighting with each other. The different states are engaged in a competition mode for their own development. We should look about the country as a holistic perspective, the development of the country as a whole, not the state as an independent body. Investment worth millions of dollars is either unheld of or limping at a snail's pace. Such situation does not send out can indeed this scare our potential capital inflow and offsetting the India's growth plan. Because if you move in such a direction, so then India's development will offset everybody. It is important to address these issues upfront if the development is to proceed at the desired speed and they achieve the targeted growth objectives. So but why these protests are continuing? The past has not been good for the displaced. That is the main thing. It is the past important to understand the real reason for landowners' resistance to part with their land. The reason is not merely the strong support that their struggle are getting from NGOs and now politicians and suddenly other do-gooders. Experience with the past resettlement does not inspire the confidence. Because whatever I told, the people are not getting confidence because they're unfolding the story of past. And so once they're unfolding the story of past, they're thinking that why should we work if the development project is not in favor of them. Landlords have no trust either the government or industry. So, but only compensation is no longer enough. You see, government is always telling that we'll give the compensation, but compensation is not properly being given, and the compensation is not calculated based on the reality. The compensation is calculated based on the government price, not based on the market price. And mostly, you look at the landless people, how they are being suffered, and land valuation is flawed. The government is not properly evaluating the land while they are giving the compensation. The land is not properly valued. So you see, cause of emergence of resistance movement, inadequate compensation. Majority population had no pattas of their land, so they are also fighting. Then forcible land because if you don't have proper patta, the government will not give you any kind of compensation. The forcible land acquisition and displacement, that is also not accepted by people. Inadequate employment provision in the acts, and then use of prospective measures in the land acquisition, lack of employment to the women. Women are being always deprived. Then degradation of ecology and environment, decline of the resistance. Why there is a decline of the resistance? Use state violence and repression. State is always using its own power, and they're what they're doing. They're trying to repress the people's voice. They're trying to create a fragmentation among the in the movements. Then consciousness of opportunity of the leaders. So the occurrence of impoverishment and its prevention, that is, how can the livelihoods of displaced people be reconstructed? That is major question. Can we really reconstruct the life and livelihoods of the peoples? Because if you look at this Michael Sarnia's model, that landlessness, joblessness, social articulation, homelessness, marginalization, food insecurity, loss of access to the common property resources, increase the morbidity and mortality. These are 8 major risks which has emerged because of this displacement. Can we develop the risk of landlessness, the risk of joblessness, risk of social disarticulation, the homelessness, marginalization, food insecurity, loss of access to common property resources, increase the morbidity and mortality? Can we develop a model? What is wrong? Of course, the government of India is different ministry have made adequate provision, but they are not taking people into consideration. It is disheartening to note that most of the project authorities, whether the government or private, give priority to the financial benefit of the project rather than to giving the interest of the peoples, those who are being affected. We are always thinking about, the project agencies are always thinking about their own profit, not about the profits of the others. It is seen that very few displaced persons or project affected persons are afford adequate facilities for resettlement. Mostly confined to resettlement, not rehabilitation. You see, we are only confining to resettlement, but not we are thinking about the rehabilitation. Whether we are properly habited, we are simply thinking that if we give a house, then our duty is over. But whether the people are properly rehabilitated or not, whether they are the place where they're resettled are having access to the proper drinking water, education facility, social recreation, cultural promotion, all these things we have to look into instead of giving interest to the people's. Protection of the interest of the multinational companies are being always encouraged. So the violation of the PESA Act, provision of extension of Panchayat Raj to scheduled areas acts are being violated. Tribal and women are most sufferer. Legal and policy instruments still continue to be dominated by notions of displacement as sacrifice. The existing legal framework on natural resources confer the totalitarian powers on the state. Compensation can solve the problem. Calculation of the cost, washing its hand by giving charge to companies, because sometimes what the government is doing, the government thinking once I are giving the charge to the companies, our thing is over. Then whenever we are developing any project, we don't have vision. The politics of displacement is continuing. Scope for the movements, we are giving the from the very beginning, we are giving the scopes to the people to join in the movements. These are all the problems. There are lots of problems that are happening in the compensation. So then if you look at our experience in India, so anything, anybody have any question or? I'll share the slide with you. I think any anybody any question? I'll send all the materials to all of to you.